Welcome back to Bets of the North on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Tyler Shoemaker. And T-Shoe, I want to be radically transparent about things. I think maybe I've been hiding myself and it's been holding us back. We started off 3-0 in our $500 bets. We're now 5-4 in our $500 bets, which is still good. We're still up money for charity. But I just need to be the real Doug on this show, T-Shoe. And the real Doug likes going to Disney World, loves One Direction, is sad about Liam, and has arms that are this white at the top. Look at that. That's how white my arms are. I got this shirt in Toronto at a One Direction show. I cut the arms off of it. It's what I wear at the pool on vacation. And I'm just going to be me. And those vibes of the real Doug are going to start making us money once again.
I'm happy to see it. You know, I am myself today also. I am wearing my Dunk Doctor logo, short sleeve hoodie. So, I mean, we can't lose with the Dunk Doctor logo on the show.
Yeah. You're the Dunk Doctor. Is that right? You are the Dunk Doctor?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
I am.
You know what I'm going to do? I think I'm going to put my sweatshirt back on. I don't think anybody wants to look at this. I don't want to scare people away. Can you believe how white the top of my arms are?
I mean, yeah, I'm not far behind you.
Yeah. So, because a farmer tan's a real thing. I mean, I'm not walking around parading this stuff around. So it's I wear shirts. So excuse me for wearing a shirt. So I have not talked about it enough that the very, very unfortunate death of Liam Payne from One Direction is really quite a sad thing. But I do love One Direction, and people need to know that. I also love winning money gambling. And we're still ahead, T-Shoe. We have to keep that in mind. From our $5,000 bankroll at the start of the year, we're going to give at least $5,000 to charity. If we're ahead, if we've made money over the course of the year, we're giving it all. So we want to make money for that. We're at $5,800.90. No, $5,890.18, T-Shoe. So that's still up almost $1,000 from a $5,000 bankroll, which is still pretty good, right?
That's really good. Anyone that would have expectations higher than that for literally anyone, I don't know what you're comparing that against, but I mean to be up $800, especially when you consider we're giving out a plus money play every week, which as we've discussed, the math says you're not going to hit those as often. So I mean, for us to be up $800 right now, I'm ecstatic about it. Obviously, hopefully we can get back on the right track. Yeah. I feel like we've caught we caught one good break the one week. We've caught a couple of bad breaks with a couple of our $500 bets. I thought Wisconsin last week was the right side for 3.5 quarters. Obviously the pick six just kind of did us in and changed the whole complexity of that game. So it happens. That's football. But I mean, I feel like our process has been really good. We've definitely, taken it seriously and putting our heads together and trying to come up with what we feel is the best bet. And again, we're up. So hopefully we can get back on the right track this week.
I mean, we're ahead 17% or whatever, which is pretty good. So for the season, we are 5-4 on our $500 bets, and we are up $418.51 on the $500 bets. On our plus money swings, which we did hit last week, we are up $471.67. So we're doing pretty darn well on those. Again, we are up $890.18. We lost last week on Wisconsin plus 7.5 versus Penn State. We hit a money line parlay on Oregon, Kansas State, Minnesota. Best bets overall, which is not including the $500 bets. You're 14-16. I'm 13-11. I had a good week last week. I was 3-1 on my bets, even though one of them was Ohio State winning by 25.5 and they won by 4. So that was the one I lost. We did talk a lot about, there was a part of me in the NT shoe that came around, and we talked about the idea that we could not figure out why BYU was an underdog at Central Florida, and then they won easily. And then why didn't we just bet that?
That game, it's funny you bring that up again. And I was too chicken. I'm glad at least the show got a win on that game, because my numbers loved it. As I said last week, that was a game that I listened to a few, national betting podcasts, and I didn't hear a single, I heard a lot of people taking UCF, but I didn't hear any data backing that up. It was just like, well, it seems like the contrarian play, like, the fishy line thing that we always talk about that drives me crazy. Like that was literally the whole handicap for anyone betting UCF. And like it was BYU all the way that whole game.
Yeah. They scored on the first possession and it was never really in doubt. They ran a fake field goal. Like they played aggressive. They played confident. Jake Retzlaff played great. UCF quarterback stuff is still goofy. UCF, I think, fired its defensive coordinator.
Yep.
Like after the game. So it was like, one team might be the 4 seed in the college football playoff. The other team is firing its defensive coordinator, who should be favored. So there's a part of me that wishes we just had stared at that even longer and been like, let's just do this. Let's just take BYU on the money line or plus the points or whatever. But we've still made some really good bets. And I feel good about this one. I will say it feels like it's going to be a rainy weekend across college football, at least parts of the country. And I know as you were sending me possible bets, that's at least on your mind a little bit. How much should people think about weather? I feel like I took like a weather under earlier this year that completely whiffed. And so it feels like you shouldn't base your whole bet around weather, but you should take it into consideration. How should people think about it?
Yeah, definitely. And obviously there are varying degrees of weather. There's, is it drizzling and the wind is like 15 miles an hour, or is it like Ohio State at Northwestern a couple years ago, where it was like literally a hurricane in Chicago? So there are obviously different degrees of, in which weather can impact the game. But I think generally speaking, you wouldn't want to base your whole play on it. I mean, as I say with anything, like don't base your whole play on any one single factor, but it is definitely something you have. If you're not considering it, you're doing yourself a disservice, I think. And I've got to play one of my bets this week. I'm actually going against my number because my number doesn't factor in the weather. So I have to kind of make that manual adjustment mentally. And so we'll get to that. But I mean, you definitely have to factor it in. Definitely.
It's what you just said. I always think the biggest factor in weather is wind.
Yep.
You really can play in the rain. You can. And even, you look at Kansas State, Iowa State last year, they played in the snow and Iowa State was running all over the place. Iowa State was putting up points in the snow. But wind, I've covered multiple games in my life now where wind has basically shut down a passing game. Ohio State Northwestern a couple years ago was the most egregious example, but I covered a Michigan State Ohio State game where JT Barrett was talking about the ball going sideways. So that I really think is, and I think it often factors into totals. Right? That's maybe where you're making more of a weather bet where you're looking for an under if the wind's going to be blowing the ball sideways. So that does factor into it. And did it factor into our $500 bet, which is an under? It is Kansas State at Houston, under 45.5. The bet is in on DraftKings, which is where we have our account to do this, at minus 110. This was, you had like 3 that you really liked. And then I said, I think I have the ones that you really like. This is the one I like the most. What drew you to this under for the Wildcats and the Cougars?
Yeah, this one surprisingly, because generally, especially at this midpoint in the week, if there's bad weather predicted, I mean, normally people just kind of, like you were saying, just rush to bet the under regardless of anything else.
Yeah.
And that hasn't really seemed to be the case. We've seen it tick down just a little bit, but it's still above the key number of 45. I project 44.5. So we're still getting value on the number, which is unusual in these weather games, as we'll get to it in a minute with another one of mine. But I mean, the fact that we're still getting value on the number, again, I project 44.5. Looking at just these teams' recent, 3-4 games, I would make it more like 41. So these teams, as they've been in conference play, basically these teams have kind of slowed down the scoring a little bit. These teams are 89th and 114th in plays per game. So neither one of these teams wants to get up and down the field. They want to, be much more methodical in what they do. Kansas State is 1-2 to the under this year at home, going under by 7 points per game. And Houston is 1-3 to the under as an underdog this year, going under by 7 points per game. So, we're getting 14 total points per game under that these teams have combined for this season. And another trend that I'm kind of monitoring on my own. And again, I don't have a big enough sample yet because I haven't had the time to dig super deep. But looking at last week, when the sharp offshore books, when that initial line move goes in the direction of my numbers, those totals hit 12-3 last week, 80%. And looking at the last couple of weeks, they've gone over 60% when that situation happens. So it's a trend I'm monitoring. Again, I wouldn't base an entire play on it, but it is kind of like, this is on top of everything else. It is definitely worth mentioning and worth keeping an eye on that. Like this could be a thing.
So Houston earlier in the year got shut out in back-to-back weeks by Cincinnati and Iowa State. They then changed quarterbacks after that. So I don't think you can base this on getting shut out by two consecutive Big 12 teams. But even with Zion Chris in at quarterback now instead of Donovan Smith, they only scored 14 against Utah last week. Smith actually started the week before against Kansas and Chris played some. They only scored 14 against Kansas. They're just not going to score a lot of points against a good team. And Kansas State can be explosive, but Kansas State's a little weird. I like Kansas State a lot. I actually probably like Kansas State more than they deserve to be liked because they're still pretty nuts. I don't think Kansas State is like a drop 48 on a bad team kind of team. So I think they're a more like a, I don't know, 30-7 kind of game here, I think is what this feels like to me. Somewhere in that range, maybe a 27-10. So I think there's a lot of factors here. And then we're putting the weather on top of it, right? Like the final cherry on top is there might be enough weather involved, bad weather. People always say weather. You mean bad weather. Right. Enough bad weather involved to affect the game. There's a 50% chance of rain. And I don't know that it's going to be super windy, but it's something. So anyway, that's kind of where we are. That's why we decided to bet $500 of our company's money on it.
Yeah, and I mean, Houston is a bad team overall, and like from a power rating standpoint, but their defense is actually pretty legit. I've got it in the top 30 of my numbers. So I mean, Houston's, if they do have a side of the ball that like is coherent, it's the defensive side, which obviously when you're playing against an offense like Kansas State's that can be explosive. That'll come in handy, obviously, when you're trying to bet an under. And like we said, Houston's offense is not, we don't figure them to do a whole lot in this game.
Yeah. Okay, so that is our $500 bet. Now our plus money swing, and I'm going to take off my sweatshirt again because I need to be transparent to balance the fact that I lied to you. I didn't exactly bet the thing that we agreed on. So now I have to expose my arms.
Oh, God. I'm so nervous. I'm getting this information in real time, and I'm nervous.
I don't love the idea of T-shirt. I'm gonna bet it. Yeah. It's what we agreed upon. Actually, change the bet. So anyway, I bet 7 orange teams in a parlay. Is that okay? No, that's not what I did. You would?
I would not be the least bit surprised.
Because I like Nebraska this week and I like Syracuse. And like, I know Nebraska's not really orange, but like we get in the red, the big red, the orange, like we're getting in that color tone. It gets me going, brother. So I will say what I did is I backed off slightly. So we were talking about a 3-team parlay. We were talking about a money line parlay initially, and then it was like, what if we just actually played the games and we got better odds on it? So what I wound up doing, Tishu, is it's the 3 teams we talked about, but I bet 2 of them with the spread, and 1 of them I did change to a money line. And so it dropped our odds from like plus 581 to plus 325, but I got scared. And I didn't want to send it to you and be like, well, the numbers, whatever. And it's like, can I just be scared? It's Halloween week. Can I be scared?
I'll allow it this week.
This is the bet. Vanderbilt plus 7 against Auburn. I think Auburn stinks. It was a slight bit of a bridge too far to bet Vanderbilt in the money line, although that would have really jacked up the odds. This actually is my favorite bet of the week is Nebraska. Nebraska minus 6.5 is in this parlay against UCLA. They're home against UCLA. I think I'm going to bet Nebraska in a money line parlay. I think I'm going to bet Nebraska minus 6.5. And I think I'm going to bet like Nebraska minus 13.5 and get 2-1 on that because Matt Rule gave a speech after they lost to Ohio State that I think maybe riled up Nebraska. And I don't think UCLA is very good. And Nebraska just had 2 tough games on the road against 2 potential playoff teams in Indiana and Ohio State. And they're going home. And they're going home with a blowout loss and then a loss where they were really competitive with Ohio State. And I think maybe they get home and this is a moment. And if those fans welcome them and embrace them, and the team embraces Matt Rule's ideas here, I also think they're like quite substantially better than UCLA. So 6.5 does not seem like much to me. So I love this bet. So that's in the parlay. And then the Iowa State game I took on the money line instead of minus 13.5. We had talked about Iowa State at minus 13.5. I'm nervous because Baron Morton is back for Texas Tech at quarterback. And Iowa State has played some close games. And I am going to be dumbfounded if they lose this game. But I just got nervous about a backdoor cover, or Iowa State just plays a little loose. You know, we talked on our show on Wednesday about all these playoff teams and everybody winning out. It's like, well, like, what if everybody doesn't win out? Iowa State's not going to lose, but the 13.5 scared me, Tishu. So I just made it the money line. So it's a 3-way parlay, 2 with the spread, 1 with the money line. We're getting it at plus 325. Don't be mad.
I'm okay with that. I mean, we're still getting 3-to-1 odds. I mean, I can't be bad. I mean, that's a game. The Iowa State game, I project Iowa State minus 17. That's one that the numbers seem to really like this week. Nebraska, I told you, my numbers have Nebraska minus 8. So my numbers would emphatically agree with you. I am a little nervous about the Nebraska leg. Like that, obviously, like of the legs, this is the one that I'm like, man, like if that's the one that doesn't hit, I would be the least surprised there.
Okay.
I don't love betting teams the week after that. And I've mentioned this before, teams that after the week they play Ohio State, Oregon, Alabama, whoever. And especially like you mentioned, Nebraska's coming off 2 big games like that. But also your speech was pretty compelling. I do think the Matt Rule thing is real. I think they absolutely could be galvanized by the performance from last week against Ohio State. So I'm good with it. And like I told you, the numbers are smarter than I am. The numbers say minus 8, so I'm good with it. And then Vanderbilt, I actually project as a 5.5 point favorite. To me, Vanderbilt this week is last week's BYU. Is like,
okay,
what's happening here? Why is Auburn, not only is Auburn a favorite, but the line continues to move towards Auburn. As it did towards UCF last week. To me, this Vanderbilt game is last week's BYU UCF game.
Vanderbilt, you could get on the money line at plus 200, which is not a bad bet. And you don't have to worry about anything. Vanderbilt wins, you bet 100 and you get 300 back. We definitely could have done that. I enjoy. It's not in the KOTN guidelines, but it's one of the things I enjoy, which is rooting against Auburn. Take Hugh Freeze's phone. Check his phone. So that would be interesting. Like, would you advise that? Is plus 200 on the money line on Vanderbilt like something that people could think about?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you are looking at betting Vanderbilt this week, on a straight bet. I mean, yeah, you can take the plus 7, but I would either split the unit and play half of it on plus 7 and half of it on the money line, or just go all money line, because like I said, I project them minus 5.5. I don't. Okay. There are no numbers that I look at that even have Auburn favored, let alone by 7.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one too. Okay, those are the things we are betting real money on. We're doing pretty good on the plus money swings.
We are.
Yeah, we're swinging.
I'm impressed by our plus money swings this year. I mean, usually those things are kind of hit and miss, but we've hit more than we missed here.
Yeah, piece some of this stuff together, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. There is another game here that I was thinking of as the BYU game this week, and it is one of your best bets. And I am very curious to hear your thinking on it. Your first best bet is South Carolina plus 2.5. Oh, wait, no, I guess that's not. I'm not thinking of the right way. But still, it's a close spread. South Carolina plus 2.5 versus Texas A&M. At minus 110 on DraftKings. I had it backwards. Texas A&M is not getting points, but you like South Carolina. To me, it's like, oh, Texas A&M is a much better team than South Carolina, and less than a field goal doesn't seem like a lot to ask. Why do you like this? What do your numbers say?
Yeah, this is probably my favorite bet this week. Wow. I wrote about it. I wrote about it in my Monday VSiN article as a best bet. I actually gave out the South Carolina money line in that. I bet this plus 4 on Sunday when it opened. It's been nothing but South Carolina money pushing this down below 3. And kind of the tell here for me with how the books have handled this is generally with this type of matchup, once it would get below 3 and touch 2.5, you would see immediate buyback to 3 on Texas A&M. If it was kind of like what you're saying, like the BYU thing. However, we haven't seen that. It's just sat since it hit 2.5. It's just sat at 2.5, which tells me that the books are way more comfortable taking Texas A&M minus 2.5 money than they are taking South Carolina plus 3 money. I actually project South Carolina as a half-point favorite here at home.
Wow, really?
A&M is coming off a huge win against LSU.
They are.
Everyone has told them all week how good they are. I mean, you can't turn on a single show without it being like, wow, was the Notre Dame loss a fluke? Like, is Texas A&M going to win the SEC and get a first round bye in the playoff? Mike Elko, to me, I think he's a great coach. He's very Pat Fitzgerald-ish to me, as far as like, man, when he's an underdog, like that's a guy you want to bet on as an underdog. But when there's expectation and they're laying points, that is very unfamiliar territory for him. I'm not saying he can't handle it ever, but I think that's very unfamiliar territory. I mean, when you're at Duke, you're never going to be a favorite. So like you're playing with house money all the time there. And now here, they were favored against Notre Dame week 1. Notre Dame wins by 10 in a game that we gave as a best bet as well. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of my perception of that. Some numbers here to back that up. South Carolina's 5-2 against the spread, covering by almost 10 points per game this year, which kind of goes back to our conversation last week about, do you ride the hot team or not? Odds makers have not caught up to them if they're covering by 10 points a game. A&M's only 3-5 against the spread, and their margin is about even. They're covering by a half point per game. So the odds makers have been pretty on with them. And again, like I mentioned with that total a minute ago, when the initial move at the sharp books goes towards my numbers on sides last week, they were 10-5 against the spread, and on home teams it was even crazier than that. I think it was 8-1 on home teams last week, and over the last few weeks it's been over 60%. So really like South Carolina here. A&M, when I looked at their home away splits, as far as my game grades on them, they've been 10 points worse on the road than they've been at home this year. So I think this is a great spot for South Carolina. This game just screams to me like everyone's going to be on A&M, kind of like what you're saying. Like, well, why is A&M, only a 2.5 point favorite against South Carolina, whatever, especially if you're looking at like AP rankings and that sort of thing, which obviously I don't. So I love this. This is my favorite bet.
So I do think I've said that of the SEC Southern frauds, I think Texas A&M is the least fraudulent of the frauds, but South Carolina had a game there against Alabama for the taking and couldn't take it at the end, but only lost to Bama by 2. Was up 2 scores on LSU early, blew the lead. They came back and took the lead again, and LSU had to score in the final 80 seconds to win that game. And then they got blown out by Ole Miss. But they didn't give up that many points to Ole Miss, and Ole Miss scores on a lot of other teams. So South Carolina's 4-3, but they were right there with LSU and Alabama. And so then it's like, okay, at home, can they be right there with Texas A&M? So then they lost by 3 to LSU and by 2 to Bama, and they're getting 2.5 against Texas A&M. So this is telling us like this line is like right in line with what they've done. And if you think Texas A&M is going to have a little bit of a letdown and now all of a sudden they're a favorite like a road favorite, are they ready to handle that? Very interesting. I like your reasoning. You kind of talked me into it. I wasn't ready to pull you. This is one of your $500 suggestions. And I was just like, I don't know. I just think Texas A&M's better, but you had good reasoning there. So, hey, good job by you, man. Good math talk there, brother.
That's why they pay me the big bucks, Doug.
Who's your favorite member of One Direction? Do you have a favorite?
Well, if you tell me their names, I can pick one, but otherwise I don't know. I don't know a name.
Come on. See, I like the guy who's definitely the fifth guy. Definitely the fifth guy is Louis Tomlinson. I always thought he had a very sweet voice and was underrated. So I do not like Zayn. I always thought he had a bad attitude. Then he left the band. I was not as into Harry as a lot of people were. And then like Niall's like the cute guy off to the side. That like it's like, oh, I don't want to be a Harry person. I'm a Niall person. So then I really was like more of a Liam and Louis guy. And then they were really good friends. So like, it's really sad again that Liam's very unfortunate passing at such an early age. And Louis put out a very tender social media post about it. But I really just check out Louis' voice sometime. Very underrated. You don't listen to any One Direction?
No, I can't say that I do.
I saw One Direction 3 times. I saw them twice in Columbus and once in Toronto. Come on. Not at all.
I mean, in fairness, your girls are older than mine, so like that.
It's not about my kids. who cares what my kids like? I love One Direction. All right, let's get to your second bet, kids. Minnesota, Illinois, under 45.5, minus 108. I think this is really interesting. The only part that scares me about this is that I think Minnesota's offense is rounding into form. Max Brosmer played great last week, but that was against Maryland, the Maryland team that was like completely deflated after beating USC the week before. Illinois plays good defense. Illinois is going to be motivated coming back after a loss to Oregon. I'm not surprised, but I'm intrigued by the idea that Minnesota is a road favorite in this game. But I do think the idea that this is 21-17 and goes under 45.5 pretty easily sounds about right to me. Why do you like it?
Yeah, well, I project 40.5 here. So
wow.
Getting quite a bit of value here on the number. And I will say, as we've gotten later in the season, like my totals projections have been super sharp as far as like with the odds makers generally. So the fact that I have a 5-point discrepancy here kind of tells me a lot about this. I don't think you're wrong that Minnesota's offense does seem to be rounding into form a little bit. I just like, are you really going to bet an over with Max Brosmer? Like, I don't know. But anyway, looking at
good Illinois secondary, like he's not going to be chucking it all over him, I don't think. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, because you got to think of both sides of the equation. So when I looked at these teams' recent games and kind of ran my formula, it actually projected a lower total at 39, which I think probably speaks more to the Illinois offense hasn't been great. I know they had the one crazy high scoring game with Purdue, but I mean that's Purdue. Illinois is 1-4 to the under as an underdog, going under by 10 points per game. I bet Minnesota -1 on Sunday. The line, has been pushed to 3. My point is, I think Illinois is going to be beat up in this game after the Oregon game. I mentioned, teams after they've played these elite teams, like it just takes such a physical and mental toll on them. And Oregon did just kind of beat up on Illinois for 4 quarters. Like that game was never in doubt. So I think this is a low-scoring game that Minnesota controls, and these teams are 91st and 118th in plays per game. So again, neither team wants to get up and down the field and play with a bunch of tempo. They want to be methodical and run the ball, play action, that sort of thing. And again, the same trend with the totals moving towards my number. 80% last week, over 60% the last few weeks. So all signs point to an under here. We did see it tick down a little bit to start, and we're getting above a key number of 45. So I really like it.
Okay. I really like that one too. And your last one's another under in this game we talked about, Nebraska, UCLA, under 40.5. That's a low total, man. And that's one of those, I think, what's the word I'm looking for? Dumb better like me sees any low total and is like, I'm going over that. And then sees any high total. It's like, I'm going under that. When actually somebody who actually analyzes it says, okay, this total's 40.5, but my numbers actually think it should be 33 or whatever. Where I'm just like, I don't know, 28-20. So why do you like this under at 40.5?
So I actually project 43 on this. This is the one I mentioned that I'm actually going against my numbers because my numbers don't account for weather. So like I have to. Okay. So do I think weather is going to be worth 2.5 points here to a total? And not only the weather, but I think the weather in conjunction with, like we mentioned, Nebraska's coming off a very physically and emotionally draining loss at Ohio State, where they probably feel like they should have won. That's kind of tough to come back from and be super sharp. I think the next week, I do think they're better than UCLA. I don't think UCLA is good, which also plays into this of like, I don't know how UCLA is even going to score points in this game. So it's like, is Nebraska going to hang 42 on them? I don't think so. These teams are combined 11-4 to the under this year by 7 points per game. The average offense in this game, in my numbers, is 62nd, and the average defense is 27. And they're average 85th in plays per game. So you got 2 slower teams, good defense, bad offense. I like the under here, even on a low number like this. I wish we were getting 41. 41 is kind of a key number in totals. I wish we were getting 41, but I still like it because I think this is going to be like that Nebraska-Rutgers game, I think, where it's like 17-7 or 21-7 or something like that. I don't think UCLA is going to contribute to this like at all.
All right. I think I'm gonna investigate that one too. Okay. My best bets. I was considering really pushing you on this for the $500 bet because the thing we talked about last week on the show, and it's like roll with Army. Army, which is 6-0-1 against the spread. They were off last week. They're favored by 21.5 at home versus Air Force. By adjusted EPA per play, which is like, again, how good you go about your business. Army has the number 2 offense in the country. Air Force has the number 122 offense. And the defensive numbers, Air Force has the number 111 defense. Army has the number 65 defense. So Army is a machine. And Air Force is not good. And I think Army will continue to be a machine. Army this year has won by 35, 17, 23, 28, 42, 34, and 17. So they've won 5 of their 7 games by more than 21.5. East Carolina, because I suddenly started paying attention to Army in the middle of the game 2 weeks ago, and I was like, these guys cover all the time. They were ahead comfortably. They were a 17-point favorite against East Carolina, and East Carolina backdoor to push. Otherwise, they'd be 7-0 against the spread. I don't know what's going to prevent this from being 42-3. I'm going to put Doug Bucks on this. It is one of my best bets. You were reluctant about a service academy game and giving up more than 3 touchdowns, and I get that. But Air Force did play Navy earlier this year and lost handily. Let me double check that schedule. So, like, they're not good. They lost 34-7 to Navy. So they lost by 27 to Navy, and Army and Navy have been very similar all year until, Navy took its first loss to Notre Dame last week. I'm going to take it as a best bet. Is it just that it's a lot of numbers in a low possession game? If it's 2 service academies who are going to run the ball, sit on it, have 8-minute drives, is just 21.5 a lot to ask in any circumstance?
Yeah, for me, it's a couple of things. One, it's the number. Just these service academy games, particularly Army, Air Force, have been, just tend to be weird as far as the score. Last year, Air Force was a double-digit favorite, and Army wins outright. When no one gave Army a chance to win that game last year. So that's part of it, is like, okay, revenge spot, a ton of points, over 3 possessions. If this number was 21 and not 21.5, like, or we could maybe push on it, I would be a little more open to it. But man, winning by more than 3 touchdowns against any service academy, even though Army is great. And I'll be honest, my number, I project 34.5. So like, okay, if this was Army against whoever, Tulsa, yeah, I would be all in on it. But the fact that it's Army versus Air Force, I've just learned, one of the things that I've learned over the years is, like, I don't bet huge favorites and I don't bet overs in service academy games, because it's like every year my numbers are like, oh, bet this huge favorite, bet this over. And then it ends up weird. So that's kind of just a personal lesson that I've learned. Otherwise I'd be all over it with you.
Because who was a huge favorite one time? England in the Revolutionary War. And they
blew a 3-1 lead, I heard.
So, like, sometimes the service academies know how to get down when it's time. So I understand it. I'm going to bet it. And if Army wins comfortably, like 45-3, I'm going to come on next week and I'm not even going to have a shirt on. I'm just going to be like, what do you think of that, Tishu?
You're just going to have enlisted.
I'm going to have an Army tattoo from nipple to nipple. Syracuse +4 against Virginia Tech. I think Syracuse bounces back after the horrible game against Pitt at -110. You actually like the other side of this. So that's okay for us to disagree here. Mine is a vibes. Mine is that was the absolute rock bottom. I don't think Kyle McCord's going to throw 5 picks again. I haven't really liked Virginia Tech much of this year, and then they almost beat Miami. I still think that Hail Mary should have counted. They should have beaten Miami. They ran all over Boston College, right? So I probably underestimate Virginia Tech, but I like the bounce back spot for Syracuse as a home dog.
And I totally get that line of thinking. I would be shocked if Syracuse plays as bad as they played last week.
Yeah.
The thing for me here is my numbers have, I mean, I feel like every week this season, my numbers have been opposite Virginia Tech, and they've covered and they've continued to like, it's one of those things where I think my numbers finally caught up with how good they actually are, because I've kind of underestimated them for the majority of the season. So it was one of those where, okay, now I see some value on Virginia Tech. I bet a -3 on Sunday. Now it's 3.5, 4. I don't love it as much there, but getting the 3 with Virginia Tech on Sunday, I felt like was a good play for me.
Okay. Last one is Duke Miami, because I just still don't believe in Miami. Ari Wasserman made a good case on our Wednesday show about like Miami has the best offensive and defensive lines in the ACC. Actually, the fact that they've won some close games late is a credit to them, because the old Miami would have blown those games. Duke plus 20.5. The 2 toughest games left on Miami's schedule are this Duke game and then at Syracuse. And the last game of the regular season, they don't play a ranked team to end of the year. They might be cruising to 12-0 in the ACC championship game. But Duke's been competitive in a lot of games, and this feels like a lot of points to me. And so I'll take a decent team getting 20.5 against a Miami team that I still really don't believe in.
Yeah, I am with you on this. I honestly, I looked to bet Duke early in the week, but I could see that the line was going the other way. So I'm really just biding my time to see what the best number is going to be. But I'm probably going to join you on Duke here. I project 17.5 in this game, and all the formulas, the highest one is 18. So they're all like around 17. So the fact you're getting above three scores here, I really like. I think Miami is good, not nearly as good as like perception would lead you to believe. And Duke's another team that like I feel like I've kind of bet against all the time this year, and now my numbers are showing some value on them. So I like that. I'm probably going to end up joining you on Duke at some point this week.
Duke is 6-2, and their losses are by 10 to Georgia Tech and by 1 to SMU. And I think SMU might be right now like almost as good as Miami. So they're also, SMU's undefeated in the ACC. They have a huge game with Pitt this week, and Duke was right there. So it seems like a lot. And if this is just a talent equation, and by the way, not a joke, which actually even makes me feel better about this. This is Manny Diaz, the Duke coach, who got fired by Miami for not being bad, but just because they wanted to hire Mario Cristobal.
That's a good point.
So this is the Duke locker room. Let's do this for Coach Diaz, who's done a great job in year 1 at Duke.
That's a great point.
I even like this more now. Holy moly, I like this. I probably will sprinkle money line on Duke too, just like shock the world. It is like Tishu that really we haven't had a gazillion. I mean, of course we had Arkansas over Tennessee and we had Vanderbilt over Alabama, and I get it. But like some games like this, I feel like there have been a ton of upsets. So there's still a lot of undefeated teams right now. And I just did it on multiple shows where you stare at the schedule, you think, man, all these undefeated teams are all going to keep winning. And then it's like, are they?
It just, that rarely happens. And you're right. As you were talking, I was kind of thinking like, this honestly wouldn't have been a bad one to give us like a long shot, $10 on the money line type deal. Cause I'm with you. I completely agree with everything you just said. I think this is great spot, mentally for Duke taking on Miami. And as we know, like Mario Cristobal tends to fold. And do you really trust him to cover this number? I don't know. I think you've definitely talked me into. I'm definitely going to be joining you on Duke at some point. Going to see where this line goes, because like I said, it took some early Miami money, so we'll see where it goes. But I'm going to join you on Duke.
It'd be great if it got to 21, but plus 800 on the money line. That could be a fun little sprinkle for like what? Like a third of a unit on the money line or something?
Yeah, probably not even that. Like quarter unit. Yeah, I'm not great at fractions, but
so I'm going to bet 25 cents. I'm betting 25 cents on Duke. Get back $4 or whatever I get. Like a man.
There you go. That's good ROI.
Take that. That's a value meal. Courtesy of Mario Cristobal. Thanks for the value meal. All right, that'll do it for this edition of Bet to the North. Let me do this one more time. This is for everybody out there who just enjoys. I don't want people to feel bad about how untan they are as we get to November. So I'm going to lay the foundation. You're more tan than this. So feel good about that. This is who we are in the North, and we're not going to apologize for it. I'm sorry. This is how we roll. And we also love One Direction. Okay.
You love One Direction.
I love One Direction. You know nothing about them. Okay, that'll do it for this edition of Bets of the North on Kings of the North. We do it every Friday morning. We love when you guys come along for the ride. And by the way, we're still winning money. So that's great. I mean, we would be having fun if we were down $2,000, right? Would we still be having fun?
We're having fun now. That's what's important.
Yeah, let's not think that into existence. Thanks to our producer, Mike Yarostowski, for making us look good and sound good. Thanks, as always, to the great Tyler Shoemaker, who brings the math and brings the energy and makes us all a little bit smarter and just a scooch bit richer. So thank you to you guys. Give us a thumb, tell a friend, subscribe so you don't miss anything that's happening here on Kings of the North. For now, he is Tyler Shoemaker. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Bets of the North.